Good morning. So yesterday afternoon, I had a quick look around a few places. I've got to say, the last 2 months, certainly the last month, have been. I've noticed a real decline in stock number in most shops, and also general quality. And when I say quality, I guess I'm talking about things that appeal to me. But even just that, like you can look at it. Even if I go into a secondhand store and I see what range they have, even if it's things I don't like, I can tell if it's like, things that people would want to have, not necessarily I would want to have, but other people would want to have. And it's pretty easy to see stores that have been completely picked over, and whatever they're getting in is just not very good. And that's how it seemed in the last month. It seems everywhere I go, even the places that were always my go-tos are less and less stuff available in general, and just what is there is rubbish. And I was actually, I'll talk about that after. I'll talk about these first, and then I'll talk about my general feelings about secondhand CD shopping in the present. So I these are the first things I've actually bought in a while. And so anyway, these were $1 each. These were from the St. John's charity store. St. John's is the ambulance organization. I don't know what they call it. It's not really a company. I think originally St. John's was like a charitable organization, and then they came to be associated with first aid and then the ambulance. Actually, no, actually, yeah, I think it's quite convoluted how they came to be running the ambulances in New Zealand, but they do. When you call 111, which would be 911 or 999, the emergency number, and you ask for ambulance, they connect you to St. John's, and St. John's sends out ambulances and takes you to hospital or performs whatever emergency medical assistance is needed at the scene. And they are not fully funded by the government, and at the same time, they're not fully private either. You don't have to pay for ambulances. I think there are some cases where you do pay, but if it's an emergency, I don't think you do. I've never had to use an ambulance, touch wood, so I don't actually know. But I know my dad has, and I'm pretty sure he didn't pay anything. Um, but they rely on a certain amount of their income from charitable donations, and so they have secondhand stores around the place that obviously the income from generated from those goes towards funding the ambulance services. They do get some government funding. Anyway, this is not really interesting. Remember this TV show? Would have been the late 80s, early 90s, Tour of Duty. Tour of Duty was a Vietnam War era. It was based in the Vietnam War, and set during the Vietnam War. And I never actually watched it. I think I remember uh, Diana Ross and the Supremes' Reflections was the opening credits music in my mind. I might be wrong on that. However, that song isn't on this. However, Baby Love by the Supremes, Diana Ross and the Supremes, is. Um, so, like it says, we've got a little kind of a blurb down here, maybe tells us something. So, Vietnam 1967, they came from all over the nation for all different reasons, but the soldiers of Fire-Based Ladybird had one thing in common: their friendship forged under fire. Some gave themselves, others gave their lives. They were heroes because they had to be. Anderson Terrence Knox, the war-weary platoon sergeant who never lost a spirit. Goldman Stephen Caffrey, the Green Lieutenant with something to prove. Horn Joshua Marur, a war protester forced to fight in spite of himself. Blah, blah, blah. Anderson leads his new platoon on hazardous missions to destroy a hidden NVA headquarters, outnumbered and outgunned. So I don't know how long this went on for. Was it like a mini series or a whole season? Let's have a look. Okay, there was 3 seasons. So obviously, so it was an American military drama television series based on the events of the Vietnam War. So broadcast CBS. The series ran for 3 seasons from '87 to 1990, with a total of 58 one-hour episodes. That's quite a large amount of things, isn't it? 58 one-hour episodes. So there was a period there where a lot of, I think like the 80s, it seemed like the 80s there was a lot of Vietnam content, wasn't there? Or content, such a stupid word. A lot of movies and TV shows about Vietnam, like Platoon, Full Metal Jacket. There was other ones. That one with Michael J. Fox. There was a few others. It's in my mind. It seems from the late '80s through the early '90s. There seemed to be quite a lot. I guess that's because a lot of the guys who fought in that war, maybe enough time had passed. I guess with things like that, I guess what you call like national, not national tragedy. I don't know if you call the Vietnam a national tragedy. Although what 58,000 soldiers, American soldiers, and however many millions of Vietnamese died in the conflict. After something happens, there's kind of like a cool off period, and then enough time passes where it seems that culturally it can be discussed and analyzed and written about and portrayed better. Because if it happens too soon after the whatever the thing is, there's too much heat around it and emotion. Anyway, I don't need my amateur analysis of these things. So as you can imagine, this is songs of that era, of the '60s, mid-late '60s. So we got, like I said, Diana Ross and the Supremes. Here Comes the Night, which apparently is by them. That's one of those songs everyone knows, but I don't think many people would know the artist. There's so many songs like that from the '60s where you've heard the song a million times, and then you don't actually know the artist who did it, because a lot of them are one-hit wonders, or a lot of times you think it was someone else. Like, that song "American Woman" by the Guess Who? When I was a kid, when I was like a teenager, for the longest time I thought that was Led Zeppelin, even though it sounds nothing like Robert Plant or like Jimmy Page's guitar. Just for some reason I thought that was Led Zeppelin. And then another one is or like that song there, "Here Comes the Night." I would have guessed, if I had to guess that, and I would have guessed like Van Morrison or something. "We Got to Get Out of This Place," The Animals, "Whiter Shade of Pale" by Procol Harum. Ichiko Park, The Small Faces, All Along the Watchtower, Jimi Hendrix, "Hurdy Gurdy Man" by Donovan, "Time of the Season" by the Zombies. God, these are really kind of some of the most cliched, stereotypical songs of that era. And "When I Die" by Blood, Sweat and Tears. The second half is a little bit more varied. We got "War" by Edwin Starr, Temptations, Marvin Gaye, Chambers Brothers, Sly and the Family Stone, The Electric Flag, Santana, Janis Joplin, and The Byrds. I think from what I remember, I'll check this. Okay, I was completely wrong. The opening theme song was an abbreviated version of "Paint It Black" by the Stones. Why did I think it was "Reflections"? Maybe "Reflections" was the intro for another Vietnam era TV show. Oh my God. This is exactly what I was talking about. Sorry, I just found this. The first part of the song was used in the title sequence of China Beach, that ran from in the US from '88 to '91. And China Beach, if I remember rightly, yes, is an American war drama television series set at Evacuation Hospital during the Vietnam War. The title refers to Mai Khe Beach in the city of Da Nang. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. China Beach and Tour of Duty were running almost exactly the same time in the late '80s, early '90s. I completely forgot about China Beach. But anyway, so you see how easy it is for me, because I was been a little kid at that time. But I just remember, TV was a big part of your life back in the '80s because there wasn't a lot else going on. Well, of course there was, but I mean as an entertainment-wise. And so I remember these things, these adult things from when I was a kid, and just had kind of snippets in my brain. And I obviously crossed the wires there on China Beach and Tour of Duty. Anyway, second thing I got, moods. My never-ending quest to find as many moods compilations as I can. Now, this is the best moods album in the world ever. And what they've done here is taken a lot of the stuff from all those other moods ones I've shown in the past, volumes 1 through 3, and all the subsequent ones that came in the 10 years after. And they've put them together, but they've also added some other things. So some of these feature on so many of the moods compilations, such as Enigma, Sadness, Adimus, El Bosco, Crockett's Theme by Jan Hammer. God, I think that's in almost every single thing ever released. Julie Cruz, Falling. That's the Twin Peaks theme, but with vocals. John Williams, Cavatina. That's from, the Deer Hunter. Robbie Robertson's Mark Chi, which is, again, on so many of those things. Clannad, theme from Harry's Game. So those ones there, certainly focused, I think, featured on the first two Moods compilations, but these other ones, a lot of them I hadn't heard before, such as Susan Aglukak, the Child, and Georgia Fumanti, Espiritu, or Hildegard von Bingen, Vision. So yeah, I just, if you watch some of my videos before, you know that I have this kind of weird soft spot for that kind of music, and I kind of just pick it up, even if a lot of it's repeated across different compilations. I'm just trying to get as many of those as I can for whatever reason. I don't even know the reason really at this stage, but it was only $1 and the condition is pretty good. Double CD, double disc. Let's see what's in the old booklet, It's just the basic liner notes. See, most of these are from that period. Like I said, they're late 80s through the 90s. So 1990, 95, 95, 94, 86, 97, 96, 95. But then they've thrown in some more recent ones, 2006, 2002, 95, 89, 2004, 81, 2002. So they're trying to update it, perhaps. Now, this last one is something I didn't even know existed, as in the musical concept of these two artists together. Never knew that they worked together, but they did apparently, and produced a number of albums. And this is kind of a best of compilation. So you can see there it says Chronicles, John and Vangelis. Now I never know am I pronouncing it Vangelis or Vangelis? I might actually check that now. Hang on. Okay, this says it's Vangelis. So it's not J, it's G. Who, of course, we talked about before, but he passed away almost exactly a year ago. It was May 2022, so just over a year. He was about 80 or 79. Would have been 80 this year. And I like his work, his movie soundtrack work in particular, but a lot of the other stuff he's done, I'm a fan of Vangelis. I'm not going to say jealous again. John, here they're talking about John Anderson, the original vocalist from Yes, the prog rock band from, I guess they formed in the late 60s, popularity through the 70s, and then he left the band in, I think, 1980, and then he came back when they did the one with the album with Owner of a Lonely Heart, which I think is at what, 90, it's not 90210, 90 something. He came back for the album, and he shared vocals there with Trevor Rabin. But yeah, apparently, through the 80s, he also worked together with Vangelis. Vangelis, and they produced work from. I've only listened through this to once. When I was in the car yesterday, I was driving to pick up my son, and then this morning when I was dropping my son off at school, to and from, I was kind of had this on, and I wasn't listening to it intently, but I was kind of, taking notice of it. It's almost exactly as you would imagine. If you said to me, you're going to take the vocals of John Anderson from Yes, and he's got a very distinctive voice, very high, quite a high register for a man, and the, what do you call it, compositional and instrumentational work of Vangelis, and put those two things together, how would you imagine? This is what I imagine. It's not anything completely revolutionary for either artist, but I think it's pretty good. It's the Vangelis part that I'm leaning more towards, because if this was just a John Anderson solo album, I probably wouldn't have picked it up, because I'm not the hugest fan of. I don't dislike it, but I don't necessarily like it either. I don't really know enough about him to really consider buying anything. You can see this is a bit grubby, needs a bit of a wipe, and it's also a bit grubby on the back as well, with a fair few kind of scratches, but it played through fine in the car, so let's just hope that it does so, continues to do so. And like I said, this is a best of, so this is taken from their work. I think they first got together in 1980, although this is a 79. And they had some success, because I saw they had 2 top 10 singles in the UK. Nothing really in the US, but I wouldn't really expect it to do much in the US. But yeah. So I was just interested that these two guys came together and they made an album. I'm not going to read all that, but it's kind of introducing both guys there. We'll read a little bit over here. The duo's first success came with the early 1980 single I Hear You Now, which hit number 11 in the UK charts. The track was taken from the LP, blah, blah, blah. John and Vangelis' next hit single came with the Christmas 81's I'll Find My Way Home, which reached number 6. I think they didn't really do much more successfully than that afterwards. And yes, like I said, John Anderson rejoined Yes in the early. He left in 1980. He rejoined in 83. I think he's come and gone from that band a few times, hasn't he? I think. I don't really know much about Yes. Well, no. After that, he stayed with them. So Yes doesn't. Okay, I thought they were still going, but they're not. I'm sure they'd got together in some iteration. Oh no, it does say. It says 2008 to the present. Okay, anyway, who cares? An interesting thing about this, and I talked about this when I was showing that Boston CD a month or 2 months ago, whenever I showed that. This is from South Africa. Because as I learned when I did the Boston CD review, that this is, the R is Rand, South African Rand. So this was 90, how do you say 90 with a South African accent? 90 Rand. For 3, great value, 34. So that looks like parity, because a CD in 94, a CD in 1994 in New Zealand would have been about between $28 to $35, $34.95, maybe that would be the upper end, but around, so it looks like the South African Rand at this time had somewhat parity with the New Zealand dollar. I don't know what the Rand is doing nowadays. I'd say it's probably not as strong as it was in 94. Do you know what 93C means? Was that 93 cents? I doubt it. But whoever bought it in South Africa, brought it to New Zealand. Like I said, quite a few South African immigrants came to New Zealand in the mid-90s, and they kept it for however long, and then they gave it to a second-hand store in the year 2023, and I bought it. So that's quite a journey, isn't it? So yeah, 3 kind of quite random things there. The first 3 things I bought for a while, because there was a period there early this year where I was kind of really picking up a lot of stuff, finding a lot of good stuff, and then it's just kind of seemed to, the last 2 or 3 months, it seems to have fallen off a cliff. And more times than not, when I go into a store, I'm walking out empty-handed and not finding really anything. And I saw this someone, where was it? Was it on? I browse a few Reddit subreddits about CD collecting, and I'm a member of a few Facebook groups. They're more local New Zealand ones for trading CDs in New Zealand, CD appreciation and things like that. And someone said just recently, at the moment, CDs are like vinyl was in the early '90s. So I think someone who knows about vinyl would be a better place to say this. But from my memory, vinyl kind of went through quite a low point, as in a lot of bands weren't even producing their album on vinyl. They weren't pressing on vinyl. They would only make a CD or even just a cassette tape copy, but they wouldn't press it to vinyl. And so during the '90s, there was a period there where vinyl really kind of dipped down, and then people weren't buying it either. And the only people left in it were really the aficionados or the collectors or and so they had a period there where a lot of people were getting rid of their vinyl collections, and so you could pick up a lot of really good stuff really cheaply in the '90s. But then, as a lot of things like that do, there was a certain like a pivot point or a turning point where people realized the value of vinyl, and it started becoming slowly more popular again, and it was getting harder to find good stuff secondhand. And I guess we get to where we are in it today, and a lot of artists primarily issue their stuff apart from online. The number one physical thing is vinyl, and CD is often an afterthought or not even. There was something, what was it? There was some artist recently their new album, they didn't make a CD copy. They just had it on vinyl or streaming. But someone was saying that now was a time like it was for vinyl in the '90s, as in that people are getting rid of their CDs or have got rid of them, and it's a good time to find it. But maybe we're at a turning point now, and that it's getting harder to find good stuff cheaply. I don't know. Is that true? Is it really? Because I don't know. It's hard to kind of zoom out and see the bigger picture whether that is in fact true. But I say just from my own experience is that there's way less of it around, it seems. CDs I'm talking about. And the stuff that is out there tends to be the same stuff over and over again, or just crap. And being able to find legitimately good stuff is just, it very rarely happens for me in the last couple of months. And that the things that I do pick up are more like this, kind of like, oh yeah, that seems like it could be interesting. Or soundtracks is, another thing I've talked about that I kind of just pick up more on a whim. But actual legitimate like musician, artists and things that I'm looking for, it's getting harder and harder for some reason. Maybe that's just a blip. Maybe we'll come back around again. Who knows? Anyway, thank you for watching. I didn't cough as much today, did I? So that's a good thing. Take it easy.